Welcome to the It's Our Life's Work podcast, brought to you by Opus Vitae Construction here in Portland, Oregon.
Okay, welcome to episode number 5, also titled The Montagno, which as I understand means little mountains in Italian. Is that correct,
Was
Brian?
the first episode called this?
No, but this one is now.
This one is, yeah.
Also called, okay.
Yeah, which also happens to be your last name for those of you that don't know, which makes it fun.
Is that correct, though?
I don't believe that it has an exact translation, but did you do your due diligence and find that out?
No, I did not. It's purely off the street. Possibly made up. I don't know.
But this is how you treat all building products also, or is it a very different mentality that you put towards names?
It's very different mentality when it comes to my
this is
professional stuff.
Example of
Yeah, exactly. But teasing you is, well, actually, it's become a bit of a profession.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's part of his
probably clean that
life.
up a little bit, yeah.
fair.
Well, welcome, Brian.
Thank you guys for having me.
Of course. So this episode, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to start off with this big block that's sitting here that I'm sure everybody's like, what the heck is that? But it leads into the second part of this episode, which is going to be talking about the use of this product on a special project that we're dealing with Brian. And we'll get into that kind of in that second part. But the first part is talking about this block that's sitting here and what it is. And it's known in the industry as a wick sif or wood insulated concrete form. And essentially it's a block, a building block, that this would make up your exterior wall assembly or the core part of it. It stacks kind of like Legos, and then the hollow areas here get filled with concrete and rebar, after they're stacked so high and they get filled with concrete, and then you stack more and you fill them with concrete. This block here is a outside corner block, which is why it has insulation on this one side here, but it also displays the two kinds of insulation sleeves that come with it. One of them is a rock wool or a mineral wool insert, and this one here is a polyisocyanate foam insert. This one here has an R value that's 2 points greater than if you use this product here, but you can get it either way. This product is made in not too far from Portland, down south in the South Valley in Philomath. So it's a pretty local product for us. The beauty part about this product is what it's made of. Traditionally, insulated concrete forms, or also known as ICFs, have styrofoam on both sides. And then the inside is filled completely with concrete. Concrete's not a great insulator. For everybody that doesn't know that, it's a really poor insulator, but it does have thermal mass, and that's an important piece of the puzzle that we'll kind of get to a little bit later. But in the short term, it doesn't have much insulation value, and that's why it's important to have this big amount of insulation here that gives the wall its good thermal performance from an insulative perspective. The form is made of recycled shipping pallets. So shipping pallets, end of their life cycle, they're a mix of softwood and hardwood. They get chipped up. They get mineralized with a proprietary formula that I'm told is mostly clay. They're mineralized, then they're mixed with cement, Portland cement, and then they're cast into these blocks. And so the cool thing about this product is the fact that it's taking a waste stream and turning it into an incredible product to build with. One of the things that we love about this product is the fact that, as you can see, there's no cavities in it for rodents or bugs to want to infestate or any of those things. This product also is very resistant to moisture and fungal growth and that sort of thing, and it can be used below grade. They actually make panels of this outer concrete material that they use for raised garden beds, so they're designed to be in contact with the earth and have a long lifespan, and so it's a pretty cool thing. Brian, what do you want to add about what this is or any of the features that you see here?
Well, one of the things that can get confusing is that, so you mentioned they're called a WICF. Mm-hmm. They're also referred to as a ICCF, which is an insulated composite concrete form. And in some respects, that's technically a more correct term to use. And I've leaned away from it mostly because it looks like it's just a typo, the double C, and it's like, oh, they just meant, and they're so different from what we're used to with the foam ICFs, both in terms of how like their performance and where they really bring value to this industry. And so I've leaned towards using the wood insulated concrete form, which in itself has its own problematic side to it, which is that it's very much not wood. I mean, there's a lot of wood in here, but in terms of how it is performing, and why one of the reasons we like this, it can be used below grade in applications that wood very much does not like.
Right.
But it's almost like it was wood. So WW, I mean, but from a visual standpoint, and then just making that disconnect between what people are used to with ICFs, which have been around a while also, and used in a lot of applications that we don't love those. So that would be the thing that I would want to make sure people understand.
Thanks for that, Brian. Yeah.
Where did you, because you're the one who brought this product initially to our attention, I believe. How did you find it? And what was it like researching it, and what made you think it was a good product to use?
Well, I came about it through building biology, and a mentor of mine, Paula Baker Lepore, who uses this a lot below her light straw clay buildings for stem wall assemblies. And it's a great alternative to a concrete stem wall because it has these other factors, and we're going to get into, I think, all of the different qualities of it. But then you can also use it above and have this continuation. So, I mean, which you could do with concrete too if you're building a concrete house, but all the reasons not to do that. And we have this wall system that is, from a design perspective, it actually simplifies things a lot because we have this continuation down, especially if we're not doing anything below grade and we just have these short stem walls, to have that concrete stem wall be this other thing that is always having to happen, and that we can now remove that and have the wall that continues all the way up to the to the roof framing.
So the some of the history of this product and how it came to be. So one, there's a company in Canada that's building a very similar product. I mean, it's only marginally slightly different, just for patent reasons, I'm sure. Then there's, as we understand it, 5 companies in Germany that are also making this similar product. And we understand that the technology started in Germany, and that they do quite a few buildings there with this similar product. But where it came from is that they discovered after World War II, when they were starting to rebuild parts of Germany that were destroyed, is that there were these homes that had these wood chips that had been mineralized that were used as insulation, packed between the timber framing of the structures that were like 500 years old and had no signs of degradation. And so somebody's like, hey, there's something here. Now, how do we turn it into a modern building, technique? And that's where this was somewhat born from. Do you have anything to add to that, either of you? I think that's
not really
500 years accurate. Is a good number of years.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good number of years for sure. And, ideally with this product and how we're constructing our exterior walls, using that product from the ground all the way up to the framing of the roof, that, we're hoping for a 200 plus year, longevity of that building, which I think is really important. I think that when you can take resources and turn them into something that lasts a long, long time, they become very light on the environment because the life cycle is so long, right? As opposed to something that you're building that, in 25, 30, 40, even 50 years or even 100 years gets chewed up, thrown to the landfill, and then another poorly constructed building takes its place.
And in that respect, it really makes sense that this developed in Europe, a place that has a long history of things lasting a long time. And so, whereas in the U.S. we're building with materials, and the thought is that they're, it's like your house, and then it goes away, and then someone else builds another house, and it's like, that's not how most people, because it doesn't, your children can take over the same spot and they can change the color or whatever, like they can put in new artwork, but the building envelope and that enclosure system, with minimal maintenance, but some lasts for as long as you need it to last.
Right.
And that's not how we've approached things, but we could.
We could.
And right, from a sustainability perspective, I totally agree, because now whatever embodied energy you have in that system, how long it's being used for and what it's preventing else from happening is huge. But also from a cost perspective, like more expensive, anytime you're trying to do the thing that is the least expensive and the quickest, and you can't compete on that respect. But when you're thinking long term, which all of us I think are trying to do, because for all sorts of reasons, but it's a total different way of taking in the value of these different kinds of products, because it will be there, over and over.
For sure. I mean, if you're talking about like a life cycle investment per year of its life, it's really low. Its initial upfront cost is higher. But if you're concerned about the long game, then it's kind of a no-brainer. What we get asked a lot though is like, well, how much more is this in traditional framing? And it's hard to say, because every project is different. Truly, every project is different. But I would say that if I was to use a figure that kind of gets us in the ballpark, is that I think it's about 30% more. When you take not just for the block and the construction of it, but the things that you have to do because you're doing that type of construction. Like getting electrical in the walls takes more effort up front because it has to be put into conduit before it's poured. Plumbing stays out of the wall. Various things that you sort of take for granted that you can just hide in a wall somewhere. You can't have in here, but you plan ahead. I mean, we're planning ahead on our projects anyway, so you just plan a little bit more, and then you build a structure that's not intended to have it be changed constantly because it wasn't done well to begin with, but you're thinking it through, you're designing it well, you're building it well, and now you've got this timeless thing that will endure for many, many, many generations, and all it needs is just a little care, a little maintenance, right? The sacrificial things like the roof, of course, that doesn't last forever, but that's the sacrificial skin that you replace. What you clad this with on the outside, like if you're choosing a brick or a stucco or any kind of masonry product, stone veneer, whatever, I mean, you're going to get equal lifetime out of that as you would the structure. If you choose to clad it with a sacrificial skin like a wood product, and obviously at some point that's going to have to be replaced, but the structure itself doesn't. And if you're doing a wood cladding on the outside, that's a biodegradable product, right? You can take it off your house and chew it up, and it can kind of go back into the earth.
Or into fast wall.
Or into fast wall. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of a pretty cool concept as far as that goes. One of the things that we haven't touched on yet though is what happens on the inside of that. So do you want to?
Well, I want to comment on the cost too, because I'm hoping, and I think there's a reason to suggest that this will be the case, but we're doing 2 projects now that are using fast wall, and there's definitely been things that we're having to refigure out that are understood with framed construction, just because we're so used to doing it. And what I'm interested to see, and I'm hopeful about, is that once we get a couple of these completed and we learn the standard details that need to happen for how we do electrical on an exterior wall in a fast wall project, both in terms of the design, thinking ahead, like you mentioned, but also in terms of the sequencing and how it's done in the field. And so the subs are familiar with it. It's not something that they're like, oh gosh, like, what is this? I need to think through it. No, they've thought through it. They know how it's going to work. That actually those costs fast wall still may be more expensive, but maybe it's not 30% anymore. Maybe it's 10 or 15. And when you're comparing totally different levels of quality, it really starts to make its own case and sell itself.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it is more expensive because it's a better product.
Right.
Right. You don't go to the car dealer and you're like, hey, The Toyota and the Ferrari are at different prices. Why is that? Right? Because they're vastly different things. They're both cars, but they're vastly different
Right.
in what they are.
And we understand that and
Right.
accept that,
Yes, exactly.
needs to be that way.
Right. And this does too, because it's vastly different, vastly better.
Yeah, one of the things before we get into the interior cladding or how we handle the interiors is I want to back up just a little bit, because the process for us of, like, say you become a little bit enamored with a product or a potential method for construction, the fight isn't over when it comes to, like, say, bringing it to Kevin and working with Kevin about that. So you talked to Paula about these forums, and then you brought the idea to Kevin. Kevin immediately was skeptical because
He's always critical at first.
That's the way it always.
We appreciate that now as we understand how things work.
It's important to be critical of these things, because we don't want to put building materials and methods in place that we don't feel like we can rely on. And so there is a really sort of devil's advocate position. So I know Kevin took a piece of one of these blocks, dipped it in water, and not just dipped it, but immersed it in water.
It's always a bucket of water. Like, you have to be careful. Like, Kevin, this is actually a gift for you.
Don't put it in water.
This is consumables. Like, if you don't want it, that's fine. But, like, this isn't meant to be,
Yeah, but he put it in water for over 6 months to check and see how it would do, if it would expand when it got exposed to water, because it's hard to believe that a wood-based product, like you said, it's a composite of a sort, but it looks like wood in some ways, that it wouldn't expand and contract when it got dry. All these questions, you eventually settled with Kevin on, like, this is something that we like. Now, you said there are these 2 projects that we're working on that both have Faswell associated with them. It's been a year and a half in development of those projects, right? It's not a fast thing. We've had a lot of exploration. At this point, as we're going into those projects, what do you love about Faswell, and what things make it challenging?
Love from a performance or all of the above?
All of the above.
So what I think I like the most is it is a mass system that is eliminating the primary concern we have from a health aspect with walls, which is related to mold. Mm-hmm. And this is not a space for mold to latch onto, and it's not a food source for mold. It's also why it can be used below grade, but even in above grade walls, because that's in the Pacific Northwest, we have rain. Every building's going to leak at some point. And when you have wood framing with drywall, you have mold behind there almost always, to different levels, and it affects different people to different degrees, but that's a huge benefit. Mm-hmm. And then it has all these other things that seem to be really consequential. Kevin's going to get more into, I think, the ability for the thermal mass benefits. The regulation of the interior humidity also plays into the health aspects with mold. It is really great for sound insulation, something that we don't think about as often in the residential, like the single family residential world. But when you've been in a space where, especially, and you got to pair it with everything, but you have your wall system, you have your windows that are also really well acoustically performing, and everything's sealed up well, and you shut the door, and all of a sudden there's like a level of peace that you don't usually get. There's not this buzz of activity that's happening all around.
Especially as we're pushing toward higher urban density and so forth.
Yeah. And it's super durable, lasting forever, but also from a stability standpoint, it doesn't shift and move the way light framing will. And from the interior plaster, which is one of the things that we really are advocating for, also from a health but also aesthetic, it's a great surface for that. So we can remove drywall, and it's actually, you could put drywall on this. It would be redundant in some ways, and it just allows us to skip that step, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. The thing about that I wanted to speak about first before we talk about the interior of the block is that we're talking about a specific product here because we love it. We're not sponsored by Fastwall or their company or anything like that. We don't get any special favors. We
would be okay with special favors.
Yeah, no, if they wanted to give us a bunch of stuff, that'd be cool. No, but really we're not. But on purpose, because we don't want a bias. We want to give information that we, through our experience and our hard work and our research, are telling us this is the best thing we know to use in this situation. Even to the point where I'm using it in my own personal house. That's how much I believe in it. And I just want to get that out there to everybody, that this is not a paid advertisement of any sort. This is because we believe in this product. And if you ever hear us talk about name brand products moving forward, it will be the same scenario where we're talking about them because we use them and we love them and they are what they say they are, and that we're not getting any kind of, promotional fees or any kickbacks for it. I just wanted to say that out loud.
We also have on our outline that we're going to get into the disadvantages too. So
yes, that's right.
Our sponsorship might be killed anyway by the time we get to that.
Well, I mean, the disadvantages from our perspective, and yeah, because that's an important thing. I think it's good to know that there's no unicorn that exists where like any one thing that you can do is like has all upside and there's no downside. That's just not real. That's just not real. But the downside in this is something that it just requires you to do things slightly different than what you're used to. That's the downside, really. But anyway, so on the interior of the block, we would put a lime plaster directly on it, and it has to be a lime plaster. Because what you're doing by plastering the inside is that becomes your interior air seal that adds to its thermal performance. But also the lime plaster is vapor open, meaning that that water molecules in vapor form are allowed to go in and out of that wall assembly. And that's important because what it's doing is that it's creating a homeostasis within the house for relative humidity. So it becomes like this, what they call a humidity flywheel. And as you're generating a lot of humidity in the house by showering, cooking, whatever, it's being absorbed into that structure. And then as things like you stop cooking, whatever, it's a dry, cold winter day or whatever, and the relative humidity outside the structure shrinks and it wants to inside as well, that this thing now is releasing that moisture back in, or that vapor back in, and the humidity in the house to keep that balance. And it's all doing it naturally without any interaction from you, which is really cool. And we've been in their at the Fastwall factory. They have some rooms in there that they enclose, and they put the lime plaster on all with this product, and it's pretty incredible when you're in there. You can feel a difference. I don't know how to explain it, but you can feel a difference. It's really pretty cool. But it has to be lime plaster or clay plaster. It can't be cement-based plasters or gypsum-based plasters, or anything synthetic, because it seals it too much, and the vapor can't move back and forth. That's a really important, cool aspect to this product. Plaster is a natural product. It's very forgiving. The chemical makeup of it is such that mold doesn't like to live on it typically. I mean, it's just like durable, beautiful, phenomenal product. And so it's really great that this product lends itself to using it on the inside. And that if you were to fur out with wood and then put sheetrock on it, or even if you attach sheetrock directly to that product, which you could, you're now decoupling from that humidity flywheel. And I think that's a huge important benefit of this product that you wouldn't want to move away from.
I think it's a really important discussion too when we get into the high performance realm, and there sometimes is an over reliance on these really high tech and technical solutions to our solving our problems within, whether it's air quality or healthy living in general. And those can be great and are necessary at times, but it's also really important to understand the natural things that materials will do. And the humidity flywheel is the same with the thermal mass aspect of it. You're working with the natural tendencies of materials to take on and release things that are in align, when they are in align with what we want on the interior side of the building, so that it's moderating comfort. It's the temperature is moderating passively. The humidity is moderating passively. And there's no charge to that. You just have to not screw it up by putting something in the wrong spot or stopping it from happening.
Yeah. It's this takes me back to a conversation we had with our project managers about the toggling you talked about in terms of costs. One of the things that comes up in all of our conversations when we begin to talk about Faswall wood insulated concrete forms, or plaster or others, is those things all sound expensive? And the answer is yes, in the short term, like we talked about before. No, not if you consider it out over a long period of time. But this is one of those areas where there can be some toggling because we know that we need this plaster on the exterior walls of the building so that they can breathe correctly and they can allow the humidity to modulate the way it needs to. But we do have options of using other materials, for example, on the interior walls, right?
Other materials, you mean like behind cabinets and things of that nature?
Yeah, behind cabinets or just on our wall surfaces. We could use gypsum or other products on interior walls.
On interior walls, yes. Yeah. So the critical piece is the exterior wall. You don't want to decouple from that humidity flywheel. But when it comes to your interior walls, as a hybrid, you can do gypsum wallboard or drywall sheetrock, whatever you want to call it, with, like a smooth wall finish or whatever. There's also scenarios where you can do the drywall with a smooth finish and then have the plaster just do a one coat texture coat on there.
And we're using a lot of, we're also gypsum on interior walls from a cost perspective and a ease of construction perspective. Right. It's not impacting that performance in the same way. I think, like you could do plaster everywhere and there's some extra steps to that, and that's awesome. You could do wood. All of the things that still I've always been, choices and accessible for wall finishes still exist for the interior walls.
They do. And it's interesting too when you brought up wood cladding, because an unsealed wood cladding also has that same reservoir effect or humidity flywheel in a smaller capacity, but it does have the ability to absorb humidity and then release it back into the house, which is pretty neat also. So we were going to talk quickly about some of the challenges with using this product. I think the biggest, most glaring one that that a potential client might be concerned about is changing their mind in construction, or like, for example, it's somewhat common in the light frame wood world to frame a house and then determine whether you want to add windows or change sizes of windows or whatever, because that product lends itself to being just quickly modified, hacked up, chewed up, whatever, and you can do whatever you want with it and at very little cost. In this scenario, like once you've designed the home and you've set blocks and you've poured them, you're done. You're not moving windows, adding
you
windows.
You got a big change order.
Yeah. Exactly.
But also just not practical or feasible. There's a real hurdle to making those changes later, which alternatively means there's a real push towards figuring things out beforehand. I like that there's more emphasis on, we got to really have this all designed well. We have to understand it. We have to see the drawings and the renderings to know what we're getting, because once we start with this, we understand that changing things is really costly, both in terms of money, but time, effort, everything.
One of the things that we need to at least acknowledge is that if we're going about building structures in this sort of way, we're taking a fairly radical deviation from what the industry has done for a long time in the United States. And people are used to being able to remodel their house endlessly with a fair amount of ease. There's a lot of cost associated, but with a fair amount of ease. The rules change in this sort of context, right? What remodeling looks like is very different.
Right. And to piggyback on what you're saying, Paul, is that it is different because now remodeling is different colors, maybe some different finishes on the inside, because you don't have to gut the structure because the structure was done well to begin with. It's not degrading. And if it was well designed by a good architect, there's no reason to touch it. Literally, 50 years from now, you could be like, oh gosh, maybe we'd like to do a different color of wall in this one room. Great. Because everything else is timeless and doesn't need to be messed with.
Right.
There's a lot of value in that, truly a lot of value in that.
It's a change of thought process.
It is.
For people who are living in it, though, to feel like caged in some way.
Right.
And that's a real thing we need to talk about with our clients as we get into these processes, because not everyone's going to appeal. That's not going to appeal to everyone, but there are some real benefits to it.
For sure. And I just think it takes a little bit of a different mindset. And I would also say that Like the nicest homes, like I'm going to use the Pittock Mansion here in Portland, for example. Phenomenally designed home. Awesome. Could you imagine like wanting to remodel that?
Right.
And you couldn't because it's, like it's stone block, right? It's limestone. Kind of similar to this in the sense that it's very permanent.
Mm-hmm.
But it was done phenomenally. There's nothing to change other than colors, right? If you decide that you want a green wall instead of a white wall, great. You just use a lime-based paint, and you can change all day long, and you haven't impacted the performance of that wall assembly. And I think that people just need to look at it that way. I think a lot of remodeling happens because people are buying garbage homes that were built not architecturally designed, poorly designed if they were. The design was 100% on aesthetics. Who cares about how they hold up? I mean, how many homes have we gone to that were architecturally designed, modern homes that were done like in the 70s and 60s that are in big failure structurally because they weren't designed well and products weren't used in the right place? We can avoid a lot of that stuff. And then remodeling becomes a different thing, right? Maybe you change out cabinetry. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting thing from my perspective where I'm often trying to get, even with light frame construction, people, there's something that their house isn't working for them in some way. Okay, so we're going to do an addition. It's almost always the first thought.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get people to take a step back. Because maybe that's what we need to do, but let's first look at the space that you have and see, can this be reconfigured in a way that actually will meet your needs? Because so often what happens is they just then live in the addition. And then there's this, like, there's still the dining room that was there and the fancy, living area, all the same furniture. They didn't really like it. It's just there. You walk through it and then you go into the addition and they want to show you. And so, like, what if, like, it kind of to your point is that it's easy to do that because we can just break through these walls.
Right.
If it wasn't so easy, it would almost force that question. And I think a lot of times we'd end up in a place where, okay, so we have this awesome, permanent exterior. And it's not that you could never change something. It's just that you have to be so much more intentional about it that when you make those changes, you're going to have put the extra thought and consideration to, like, this is really valuable and I understand and it's worth the effort to go ahead and do this.
Yeah, and adding on, just so adding on.
We've all added on to Paul's comment now.
Right, no, but
Adding on to
even
the house.
Paul, I think.
But adding on to one of these, mass wall structures is,
okay.
yeah.
It means literally adding
right,
on.
yeah, but it's easy, right? Because you're just adding something onto it. It's reconfiguring an existing mass wall structure that becomes more challenging.
What I really appreciate about structures that are intended to be used for 200 years or more is that because of the depth of building and science knowledge we have these days, we can find out what it is the client is shooting for in terms of outcomes of their house, health, indoor air quality, quiet, durability, and other things that we talk about all the time. And then we can build backwards from a very thoughtful starting point to hit all those things, knowing that those values will probably endure for a long time and that other people who would live in the house would also appreciate those values. Instead of kind of throwing something together and seeing what outcomes happen, we're going the other direction.
Except for the people who hate quality.
Yeah, right. I know a lot of those people.
Well, if they hate quality, we're not for them.
Yeah.
Like nobody here at the table is for them. Yeah, for sure. Is there anything you wanted to add to the?
I would say one thing that's really important is that it's a modular system. It's a block. You can cut them. I mean, we've talked about the ability to manipulate these blocks, but you definitely get an efficiency both from a design and a construction standpoint when you work on the module most of the time, and it's truly the exceptions that are breaking it. And so what I've found, and I actually like this because it forces a sense of consistency and relationship consistency between different elements of the building when you're working on that. So windows are on the module as much as possible. The walls, like, you're not doing walls that are 20 foot 2 inches. Like, it's just like, because in light frame construction, that's not as big of a deal, even though it probably should be considered more. You still have plywood sheets that you're going to, but like you make it on the foot or the 2 foot and you accept that early on, and then you get the most benefits of this system.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, like, judging from what you're able to do with my house, I mean, like, anything's possible with this stuff, and you can turn out some really incredible buildings that are gorgeous and are architecturally interesting and durable as all get out and healthy and all of those things, including the people that are working on it, because that's something that's largely overlooked in the materials that we select, or who's installing this stuff and how is it impacting their health when they do. That is way overlooked all the time, and I think it's an important thing to consider. But if we circle back a little bit to some of the issues or some of the challenges that we have working with it, the other one is, putting electrical on exterior walls takes a lot of intentionality early up front, because retrofitting it in later can be possible, but it's not ideal.
Right.
And also window sizing and details, like you're saying. There is some flexibility to shrink openings once you've finished pouring.
Yeah.
You're not enlarging any openings to change for windows.
No, or you're not moving it 3 inches or 6 inches or any of
No.
those things, or popping a new window here that one didn't exist.
Right.
And also because you have an engineering that was designed based on where the current windows are. And so when you alter that, you're opening up a pretty big can of worms.
And, we also have thick walls.
Yes.
So I love that aspect of it. It feels like stone
Substantial,
European.
right.
Yeah, it's substantial. I like the depth that you're playing with, but you just need to understand that if you're under really tight constraints, like your walls are going to be this thick because that's just the size of these blocks come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we get into like your specific project, I find it interesting that this is a product that the two builds we're talking about, or that we've referenced, are our first two builds with this product, and they happen to be your house or a project that you own and one that you own, which to me is knowing both of you and how far down the rabbit hole you go before you make a decision for something, for a product, for a method. You want to feel really confident about it. So it gives me a whole lot of confidence to look at the two of you and know that you are invested in this because you see the benefits of these methods. That speaks a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Paul, I know you and I were talking about a potential client we have that is sort of maybe considering using this product. And I was telling you, I'm like, that client has a unique opportunity here because they get to witness and see what a builder, and not just a builder, somebody that's been doing this for 35 years.
An awesome builder.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. I was paused. I was waiting for
I wasn't giving it
more, but yeah, no, that's fine, Paul. But
We're not talking about you.
No.
No, but for somebody that has lots and lots and lots of experience and knowledge and has spent their career like trying to be the best at all these things and know as much as they possibly can, that this is what I'm doing for my own personal house. And it's not because it's trendy and all that stuff. It's because I find it to be the best option that we have now for our area in particular. And that they should really pay attention to what I'm doing and want to do the exact same thing. And, most people don't have those opportunities to see what a high level builder is doing for themselves and then replicate it in their own, because it's pretty safe, right? If you're at a farmer's house, you're going to pay attention to what he's eating because he's growing it, right?
Right.
And he knows the good stuff and staying away from the bad stuff. It's kind of the same thing here. Like, pay attention to what we're doing on our personal stuff, because that's the right path. You should follow it. So anyway, little side note.
Yeah.
So Brian, let's move over or transition over to talk about your special project.
Special project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be nice, actually. It's it'd be awesome if we could have gotten the logo up here to go on top of.
Our logo's so nice, though.
It is, and just so we're clear, this is our show. There it is. Look at that.
Oh,
wow.
So the Keets. This is the. It's been a long time of evolution in a project that is intended to be a showcase and demonstration project for A over A. I mean, my firm, as well as we're working with Opus very closely on this and a lot of other partners. And the goal of it is to do exactly what you just said, is that so often we're talking about things, even when we've enacted them in projects, whether it's materials or building systems or strategies or an approach to design, and it's someone's personal residence. And if everything goes perfectly, no one else will, it's like their friends will see it. But like in terms of like getting other clients to like understand and be able to really see and experience something, it's not really an option. And so with this project, what we're planning on doing is using it as a rental, visitable showcase, having events there, and taking people to experience just the things that we're doing.
What is a Keet?
Right. So a Keet is a small modern home. It's typically of a single story. It's built with healthy, sustainable, and high-performing building materials and assemblies. It is most often found in pairs, although it doesn't always have to be. There are solo Keets. Paul and I have been working and hopefully are going to continue to work on finding a spot for a flock to land at some point.
So we got a pair of Keets now.
But this first project, the Catlin Keets, is a pair of Keets in St. John's in Portland. So it's these two units. They are similar to one another, and they are intended to exemplify like that ideology. So we're using FasWall as our wall system. One of the interesting things about it is that, so in terms of the mass wall systems that exist, which can be appropriate in different climates, FasWall is one of them. Adobe is another. There's Cobb construction. Straw bale wouldn't be that, but there's the FasWall system. One of the reasons that I was really excited about it is that it is a more known thing. It's used throughout the Pacific Northwest. It's even hasn't been used in Portland before. And ironically, I thought that was going to make it a lot easier to get this approved in the city of Portland. And it has been a challenge, although we finally got our building permit. So that's, super exciting. But the other aspects of it are we're using natural plaster. We're using as much locally sourced wood products as we can, unsealed where applicable. So on places that you're not touching, so you get that humidity regulation from the wood, and also the beauty of it. I mean, we have a tendency to want to cover wood with plastic. It's a very interesting, and it's like, yes, it'll make it so that nothing comes in contact with the wood, including you, right? Like you don't get the real, so it kind of just looks ish like wood, and you don't get the feel, like you're missing that really strong connection with the natural material.
Yeah, for sure. Plus there's an acoustical benefit to have an unsealed wood also,
right?
because it absorbs
not reflective of the surface. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about covering it with plastic, not everyone knows what you're talking about.
It's a lot of the poly finishes. Just you put them on, and when they cure, they're essentially creating a plastic layer, as opposed to a natural oil. There are finishes that we can use that don't get to that same level, and those are especially important in places like our windows, where you will be in contact with humans. I mean, the unsealed wood is not as easy to clean, so you want to be conscious of that. But it's just depending on where. So like our ceilings, we're planning on using a white fir from Oregon, having that be unsealed. Juniper planter beds instead of concrete, I think, is an interesting concept that we've seen before, that we want to explore that too as an alternative. And they're long lasting, not as long lasting as concrete would be, but you're using a product that is actually harvested because it is an invasive, it's a native invasive species. It's taking over areas that are outside of its normal growing areas because of climate change and how the watersheds have changed there, and the juniper is soaking up and competing out other species. So we're able to use that product, which is not great for a lot of other building applications. And then, wood on the exterior as well, metal roof. So not everything is crazy alternative, but a small footprint. It's they're about 600 square feet each. So it's a sleeping space, a living space, and a bathing space. And then we have the ability to show people an example of like, not that they have to have this exact same thing when they do their home, but they'll be able to stain it. They'll be able to wake up and touch the plaster walls, which you should touch.
Yeah.
They're wonderful.
Yeah.
Like they're inviting, and please, put your face up against them. Like no one has to be there when you do it, but it's a great experience. And
Have you done that, Brian?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah. Only when people aren't looking. Actually, no, I have done it with it.
If Kevin was looking, you wouldn't do it for certain.
Yeah,
No.
that's true.
I can tell you've been there because I can see the beard mark.
Just it's like the trowel.
Exactly. Yes.
And then we're pairing that with just quality things all around, so that the things that we're trying to do differently are paired with things that we already know work really well. So what the hardware is, the cabinetry construction, using non-toxic finishes even for that, so that we're making a healthy space that people can either use as a way to explore for their own project if they're interested in something, but they don't have a chance to see it themselves. We're also exploring the possibility for people using this who are recovering from some environmental condition, whether their house had a mold issue and they got really sick, and their house is being renovated, and they need some place to go for a month where this is not going to be an issue. I mean, we're going to pair it with like the types of cleaners that we're using to make sure that all of those are totally non-toxic, and have it tested and vetted so that mold is not an issue, and that we can prove that through data that monitoring the humidity, all that kind of stuff, air quality.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that you said there that we've alluded to a couple of times when we've talked to you, Kevin and I, and you also come from being Passive House certified and trained for high performance structures. And the high performance structures tend to push in toward things like a super tight house, energy efficient house, and those sort of things. What we don't stop to think about is, if not done thoughtfully, those same moves that are very beneficial in some ways can be counterproductive or even harmful in other ways. And that's where that building biology that you and Kevin have both talked about and are deeply involved in comes into play. And I might at some point. Because there are other aspects of like human health and the occupant health, off-gassing, things that you've just mentioned now when you were talking about the Keets that are very, very important to the thriving of the people who are in the structure.
Yeah, I mean, building like really energy efficient buildings that make you sick, that sounds like a horrible plan. No one ever set out to do that.
No,
but
not at all.
But what we've discovered through, unfortunately, the vast experiment of mostly within older homes, but even with new construction, is when you're making something energy efficient, what you're essentially doing is decreasing its ability to transfer energy. And we're often doing that by removing the ability for air to leak out, which from an energy standpoint is great, but it also means you've eliminated the primary way that toxins have been diluted in your house forever. And so it's extra important now that we have to be careful about what comes in, what is put in there to begin with, and how we deal with things when they are in any contaminant in the space when we're doing that.
Right.
Yep.
And the one thing that the general public doesn't know is that code changes are requiring us to make the house tighter and tighter and tighter. So you don't have the option to have a leaky assembly anymore, which is what was happening, up until probably about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, maybe a little bit less, where, you could still build a pretty leaky assembly that was pretty forgiving. And now as the code is requiring for energy conservation to make it tighter and tighter and tighter, the opportunities for failure are greater and greater and greater. And, our strategies have some redundancies into them, but also the quality of the lungs of the house that you put in, which is mechanical ventilation, the quality of that matters. Because if it is inefficient, if it's noisy, if it fails, people are going to turn it off and not know the catastrophic outcomes of doing that because they just don't know. And that's something that gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, a couple of years ago when we had wildfires that made it almost impossible for us to be outside, everyone realizes pretty quickly how important your lungs are. and how it doesn't feel good when you're outside without a mask, for example, in those conditions. You talked about the lungs of the house. Talk about one of you about what the HRV does for the house and what is an HRV.
You want to take that?
You want to take that, Brian?
You
I'll
love talking
take it.
about Zender.
Okay, Brian. So again, everybody, this is not a paid sponsorship. I do love Zender a lot, and I think that there's another European company that's out there putting out a very similar product in terms of efficiency and reliability and all that kind of stuff. But Zender's one that we have experience with directly, and it's incredible. Its efficiency and the quality of components that are in there, and the totality of its system. So you use all proprietary stuff for the whole system, which is really great because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the install. And they also design the system for the house. And that's something that Zender does. And then after it's installed, then you're required to have a Zender factory tech come and commission the system to make sure it's all working as intended in the beginning, so that there's no products out there that were misinstalled and not balanced out and working well and then failing. They take it very seriously. But ultimately what an HRV is it stands for heat recovery ventilator, and it is taking the stale, moist air out of the home. Like when I say moist, I'm talking about the areas that we don't want it to be, like in showers and laundry rooms and places like that. And it's taking the moist, but also the stale, like the air that's just sitting there. Carbon dioxide, all those things. And it's pulling it from areas from the house, and it's bringing in fresh air from the outside, filtered fresh air. The air streams never touch, but they go through a heat exchanger so that you're charging the air coming in with the air going out, which means that you're not having to make up the difference in temperature from outside to inside. And that's really important for efficiency. And it's filtered again. And so that's the lungs of the house. It's doing the breathing for you. It's all happening automatically. It's constantly on, always. You don't have to do anything other than when the machine says, hey, it's time to change the filter. You open the cabinet, you pull the 2 filters out, you put the new one in, you're done. That's it. Simple, easy. We believe the importance of putting those in places that are very easily accessible so that they will be maintained, because in the absence of that, you're hurting yourself with your indoor air quality. Now, as a redundancy, you can open a window, right? You know, natural ventilation is best ventilation, truly. But there's times where you can't. Wildfire season's one of them.
So this is that redundancy that we have in place for those times.
Yes.
Heavy ventilation isn't accessible.
Heavy pollen times can be another one where people don't want to just open their window. They want to have something that's filtering those out.
Your neighbors doing their roundup routine.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. But the cool thing for me is that it's just happening automatically. You don't have to do anything. The only thing you have to do is pay attention and change out the filters when the machine tells you to do it. That's it.
And to go back to like one of your questions before, like our approach to this whole project is energy efficiency is important. We're prioritizing the occupant health first and above that, and making sure that if those ever do come in conflict, we're making sure that health is the first thing that we're focusing on.
Yeah. Which is very different than how our industry is geared and
so
moving towards.
Yeah. So we're making sure, like, and we start with the sleeping space, and we work out from there to the interior condition envelope, and then concerning with just all of the materials in the whole space.
Kevin.
Yes.
Didn't you say this is our show?
I did.
Well, the Keets are.
Oh, there we go. Now,
Look who's in control now.
Exactly. Now,
it's not that we're not interested in the Keets, Brian.
No. Now the balance between good and evil.
They can't last
right.
forever.
No.
Well, they actually do. When
they do.
Their physical form,
Yeah.
it's not their digital.
So, Brian, going back to the Keets, the direction that you're moving on them, or the direction that you set for this project that we're building alongside with you, costs more money than what a housing appraiser says it's worth. And you know that. And you're doing it anyway. Why? What motivates that?
The motivation is just that I believe this. I tell other people it, and this is my opportunity to put it into practice, what I've been advocating for a long time, which is that the quality of space matters. The appraisal market, the real estate market tend to value the quantity of space, the size, it's the number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, how many cars can you fit in your garage. And none of it ever speaks to, well, what is it like when you're in there? And how do you feel? Like, how does it reduce your stress? Or like all these things that are so hard to quantify, but are the most important things. Your happiness is tied to the spaces that you're in. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it can create them. I mean, the people who are sick from their buildings, there's almost nothing else that enters their mind when that just becomes their world. And for most of us, we're hopefully not at that place. I mean, none of us are, but that there's all of these things that still can be tied to it. And it can be something as simple as a headache or with allergies that, like, it's not just from the outside, right? You can have allergic reactions to all sorts of different products, the cleaning products in your house, all of these different things. And so this is an opportunity for me to test this in practice and say, hey, like, we are going to invest in the quality of the space. And for, square foot for square foot, it is going to be more expensive. And I know that going through. And it's not that, we're working through budgets now. We're still having to make decisions. Not everything is going to be like what I would otherwise do if I had an unlimited budget. But in every single case, we're making sure that when we're making a decision, it is going to be a quality product and it's not going to be unhealthy for the interior occupant. And so with that in mind, we're making sure that never gets disrupted through this whole process. And my hope and belief is that when people experience this space, that will make itself apparent. And that, and because you get the chance to test it, which I'm really excited about aspect of it, like, come stay for 2 nights. Like, you don't get to do that anywhere else, right? It's a crappy hotel, but like, this is like a high quality structure that is built in line in accordance with the principles that we advocate at our firm, that you advocate at yours in terms of design and construction. Like, this is going to be an example of that. We're both putting, like, there's a stake in this. Like, we are advertising this and pitching it and saying, like, this is a reflection of what we want and are able to do. And then it's going to be out there. And I'm excited for that reaction and to see how people do respond to it.
We're very excited about that too, because there are plenty of times that there are features of a house that we really like or are drawn to, but once an occupant moves into it, we don't really get access to it to show it off. We can show it off in pictures, but that's not the same as an experience in a space. A lot of time, you can't get the sense of volume, you can't get the sense of color and relationships and other things like that.
You can't rub your beard against
the plaster.
Rub your beard.
That is correct. But you are specifically not moving into the structure, but you're using it for short and medium term rentals, which give us that option to show it off, which is super exciting to us, because these techniques, these practices, these thoughtful details that are being put in need to be shown off and experienced.
Yeah, and that's another exciting part too, is that it is a small space, but it's going to have a lot in it, and both in terms of the details, the window system that we're using, the cabinetry, and everything that you touch and come into contact with will have that carried through level of quality. And even if, like, you haven't thought before how much it matters to have, just a solid door that moves really seamlessly, and the handle has the 28-degree turns instead of the 45. Just like, when you experience all that together, I think it makes a difference. And even if you can't put your finger on what exactly it was, it's like, that was great, and like, I want you to do that for me. Like, that's what I'm hoping. And so then, hopefully we get future projects out of it that are also in line with what we're trying to accomplish, and that you do also. And then I can feel good about all this time that I put into, like, pushing people in a direction, because it's like, they'll be better off because of it. And that's what, and not that it's the same thing. All of these are unique. Everything that we do for someone is unique to them and their site and their, what their constraints and considerations are. But there are certain principles and uniform things that need to be taken into account every single time. And quality is one of those, right? It's like, that doesn't have to look the same. But like you said, like, if you don't care about quality, I have a hard time wanting to engage. Right?
Right.
It's like if you care about, like I really want the view, or I really want to have a focus on, the dining area. Like that's your preference. Like whatever you like, we can design all that into it, but they both got to be done well.
Yeah, exactly. Because a view that is making you sick isn't a view that you want.
No.
No, we'll reference you have a specific website devoted to the Keets.
BuildKeets.com.
Yes, we'll put it in the
Thank you.
notes also. So that's an exciting thing for people to look at after this, because you go much more in depth about why you're doing this, what materials you've chosen, and some of the other features of the Keets that we don't have time for.
Yeah, and to be clear again, we're not sponsored by BuildKeets.com.
I've been throwing around
Kind of
product
are.
names.
They're paying you.
Product names all day long.
But the one thing I wanted to bring up too about the Keets, it's so neat in having it be in the short-term rental pool, or at least one unit in the short-term rental pool, is the fact that somebody that has chemical sensitivities or that sort of thing has a place that they can stay.
Yeah, that's
like
a good
if
point.
they want to
Even
come
for
and visit
vacations.
Portland, right?
Yeah.
Because I imagine if you had chemical sensitivities or concerns or whatever, and you're like, I can't stay at a hotel because I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't stay at that Airbnb because like who knows. But this place I can.
Mm-hmm.
Or at
That's
least
pretty cool.
Yeah, at least we're going to give them the information to make an informed
Right.
decision about that. I mean, every people can be, react to all sorts of different things. So we're going to do our best to take out all of the known common ones, certainly things that are just bad for life, like
Right.
we don't need to be in there. And then we'll make clear like what products we have in there, like what finishing or furniture and the bedding and the cleaning products and the soaps that we're using. All of that will be made available on the website by the time we're getting ready to have people stay. And then you just, I mean, it's a disclosure. We're being transparent about what's here, what we've done. That's also going to be a part of this process. I mean, we're talking about documenting the construction and things like that through this build. But one of the things that we're also going to do is make clear like where we tried to get to, what areas we exceeded or excelled at, and what areas we didn't get as far as we want.
Yeah.
And so we have areas to know where we're going in the future. And I think that's an important thing for the industry and just helps us all move forward. And we're recognizing that this is incredibly hard to do. Like all of these principles at play, like we're fighting a lot of things.
We
like
are.
it's the permitting process, it's the building industry, it's just what's accessible and available in our area. All of those things get taken into account, and it's a lot
It really
to
is.
do it all in one project. Like I hope someone can do that and get 100% all the way there. And I'm not even sure that that's possible, but we can get really close and we can keep getting closer. And that's what we're trying to do.
It is, because I mean the path for perfection is almost a fool's errand, and there's going to be decisions that you're going to have to make. But if we can just do better than the last one, that's a plus.
Right.
And then we build on that, and we build on that, and we build on that. So yeah, that's
And like
awesome.
you suggested, as hopefully we bring these things to more mainstream consciousness, and as products become more available on the West Coast as opposed to the East Coast or from internationally, then our costs begin to come down as well.
And that's what hopefully we'll do through this, is making it accessible. I mean, I know you're planning on bringing prospective clients and having them stay as a way to advocate for, this, what Opus can deliver in terms of a quality product. And I think that's going to be a game changer for you too. I hope it will be, because it's not something that really exists at this point where you have that opportunity.
Right.
It's like, oh, hopefully, a house is like almost finished and the clients haven't moved in there yet, and you can take someone to look at with their permission to do that, right? But that's a very small window that you have to have all those things align.
It is, for sure. And even if clients allow us to show their house to prospective clients, which does happen sometimes, it's an uncomfortable thing because you're in somebody's home and they're being very gracious with their allowing you to come there and show people.
They
And-
get up in the morning and Kevin's just standing outside there looking at details with a cup of coffee.
Right. And you don't get to spend much time in there and really interact with the space. And
No.
I think that's a nice thing that this is affording. So
Yeah,
that's great.
the time and just being there and relaxed,
Right.
even different than spending an hour in some place, but like you're just there for a couple days. You're doing your normal things. So the stuff that you can't discover when you're even looking for it,
Right.
you only can discover when you're not, because you just go, all right, I'm gonna make lunch.
Yeah.
And like, wow, like the cabinet, like that feels really good. Okay. And like the faucet, like just all that stuff feels good and works well. And And then you get a sense of the quality of the space that comes in little ways that you may not have been able to anticipate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Brian, we're at the end of our time. So
Are we taking an intermission before the second half?
Yeah.
No, the second half came and gone, my friend.
I had so many things that...
We'll get another chance with you, Brian, on the Keets. I'm sure this project is going to take us a good 10 months or so to get through the build cycle.
Kevin promised me 9.
I'm
want that on
just
the
being
record.
the project manager in the room.
Brian, you know I don't promise anything except a good time. No, but really, yeah, it's going to take what it does, but we're going to try and move as quickly as we can through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
excited to begin this process. We're going to be signing our contract with you tomorrow, and
Tomorrow.
so I guess I have until then to
Right.
change
back
my
out.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
You better not do that.
No. This episode will never see the light of day.
That's true.
So, yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining us on our episode today. We had a lot of fun talking with our guests. We really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be looking forward to you when our next content comes out.